I guess it was about 8 months ago, maybe a year ago by now, that I heard about the National Infrastructure Bank, and I thought it was a fascinating concept. So I've invited the coalition of people from the National Infrastructure Bank Coalition to present to us tonight about the work that they're doing. We're trying to get HR 3339 passed. That's the National Infrastructure Bank, and that'll facilitate long-term financing of infrastructure projects. And we have some local sponsors like Dwight Evans, who is a representative in Philadelphia. And there's a lot of broad and growing grassroots support for this, but it doesn't seem to get the publicity that it should be getting. And therefore, I thought it'd be good for this group of the combined Jewish Earth Alliance and Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light to hear about it. So I'm going to turn it over to several people. Going to turn it over to the man who calls himself the NIB Coalition, who also has a name by the name
It
of.
doesn't have a name, actually. It's, that masked man. I don't know. My wife set this thing up, and I can't figure out how to change the darn name, but okay. Well, I'm just going to take like literally a minute. Stuart Rosenblatt. You won't see that name on the screen, but that is my pseudonym when I'm not NIB Coalition. So, and I want to thank you for inviting us to participate in your meeting this evening, and thank our dear friend from Erie, from near where I grew up in Cleveland, Margaret Taylor. She's the instigator of this, so I want to thank Margaret.
You're welcome, Stu. Thank you so much.
I knew you were there, hiding behind your real name, as opposed to
right.
What we're going to do is we're going to give you guys and gals a briefing on a bill that's in the U.S. Congress, which would create a $5 trillion bank for infrastructure only. It has been done. It's gaining support at a grassroots level, and that support is beginning now to spill over into the Congress. In the state, well, nationwide, we have 25 state legislatures that have introduced resolutions in support of the bill in Congress. Both houses in Pennsylvania have resolutions, and the House resolution has near 50 bipartisan co-sponsors, but the leadership of the House, the Republican leadership, won't let it go beyond gaining co-sponsors, which doesn't mean that we can't move that, because we believe we're going to even move these Republicans, hook, line, and sinker. On top of that, we've gotten city councils and county councils in the state have endorsed the bill in Congress, including Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and Lancaster and Allentown, et cetera, and Northampton County. And we got the County Council Association for the state. And we got the National Association of Counties and city councils and state legislatures around the country. So there is a kind of burgeoning grassroots movement. What we want to do is brief you tonight for just a couple of minutes. What do we have, like 20 minutes, something like that, plus or minus? So what we'll do is Alfaka Mutardi is going to brief you on this. Then we're going to throw it back to you. And then at the arm twisting, brutal insistence of Phyllis, we have some things that we want you to consider engaging in with us to move this forward. So with that, I'm going to introduce Alfaka Mutardi, and she will introduce herself and give you about 5 minutes worth of slides. We will make the slides available to everybody. So don't think you have to take copious notes unless you're OCD and a glutton for punishment. Okay, Alfaka. Oh, and by the way, I actually went to school in Pennsylvania back in the dark ages. So I'm used to live in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. All right, Alfaka, go ahead.
Great. Thank you very much. And it's really wonderful to meet all of you. My name is Alfaka Mutardi. I'm a macroeconomist. I worked for 25 years at the International Monetary Fund. Now I'm the lead economist on this National Infrastructure Bank proposal and advising on the project. So I do have a few slides to show you. It makes explaining the bank easier. And as Stu said, we'll send you a copy of the slides. So the bill in Congress that we're pushing for is HR 3339. What it would do would be to create a $5 trillion public bank to lend for infrastructure projects all across the country. And the reason we need a public bank is we're simply not able to finance infrastructure, either through the federal budget, through state and local budgets, municipal bonds. Nothing's working. Proof of the pudding is that our spending has fallen from 4% of GDP in the 1960s down to 2.4% today. And even though we just had a bill pass in Congress, not going to be large enough, as I'll show you in a moment, to do the whole job. Currently, this bill has 8 sponsors and co-sponsors, including from Pennsylvania. Mike Doyle just signed on last week, and prior to that, Dwight Evans signed on. We are actively looking for somebody in the Senate to introduce the bill, and both Republicans and Democrats to sign on to this bill. It's a really good fit for both parties, and it's really essentially a nonpartisan bill. So the idea of a public bank to finance infrastructure is not a new one. We've had 4 really large banks in our nation's past, starting after the American Revolutionary War. This was developed by Alexander Hamilton, and all the rest of these banks are very much Hamiltonian banks. Then going all the way through the Great Depression and winning World War II, really written by the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, which made all of that possible. These banks aren't around anymore. They had a 20-year sunset clause on them. That's why they went away. But to suffice it to say, they built most of our nation's infrastructure, and they were financially very successful. All the loans were paid back. So this 5th iteration, this 5th proposal for a bank is modeled on those earlier 4. Instead of going to the federal budget and asking for money to get the bank started, instead we go to the private sector who are holding treasuries for savings or investment purposes, ask them would they like to sell in a small portion of them into the NIB in exchange for an equivalent of preferred stock that would pay these investors an extra 2% more than they're currently earning on the treasuries. That's the enticement for them to sell in. And that 2% stream of money would come out of the interest earnings from the NIB's loans, with plenty of money left over to meet the bank's other operational needs. So that this means that this bank is fully self-sustaining, doesn't require any financial inputs in order for it to keep on operating. So that fully capitalizes the bank, and that capital sits on the bank's books. It's not used up in any way, but is required by a bank, all banks, in order to give out loans. So that's the capitalization process. Now we're ready to give out an actual loan. That's step 2 of the process. And this loan process works exactly like a commercial bank. Each time that the NIB takes in and approves a loan, it actually creates a deposit in the borrower's name. Whenever you create a deposit like that, you're actually creating money. And then the NIB uses its cash on hand coming in from other deposits or loan repayments or any cash that it has in order to move money out of this deposit and into the rest of the banking system. The loans will go primarily to any public entity that owns public infrastructure, state, a county, a city, could be a transit or a authority or a water utility. The idea is to keep public infrastructure in public hands. The loan terms accordingly would be very advantageous for these public borrowers. We want to keep their financing costs down to a bare minimum. So we'll be asking for only the Treasury bond rate as interest charged and flexible repayment terms as well. This is what the bank covers, around $5 trillion in projects, as I mentioned. So where did that number come from? About half of it came from the American Society of Civil Engineers, who say over the next 10 years, that's how much new money we need just to repair our transportation systems, our water systems, upgrade our electric power grid. We added some categories of our own we think are highly critical: a complete high-speed rail network all across the country, broadband everywhere, rural, urban, affordable everywhere. We also factored in 7 million affordable housing units that would be targeted to the very lowest income earners who are becoming housing insecure in this current real estate market. and then some large-scale water projects to address drought in the Southwest, where we grow half of our nation's food supply. If we don't take care of that, we're going to have much, much higher food prices on grocery store shelves all across the country. So this is the same $5 trillion expressed in billions of dollars. Did it this way so that we could compare it to this bill that passed last November, the bipartisan infrastructure law. That bill is only providing about 1/10 of the new money that we need to cover everything. What it means is that every single state, including Pennsylvania, will not be able to get everything that it needs to fix its roads and bridges. And keep in mind, we just had a bridge collapse in Pittsburgh. There's 3,000 more of them that are in very dangerous situation. It's a matter of urgency that we want to get all those bridges repaired. Transit falls way short in the BIL. Drinking water systems, almost a negligible amount. This will not be enough, by the way, to fix all the lead service lines that are in Pennsylvania. There's only 15 billion in this bill for that, and we've got about 280 plus more money for all the rest of the water infrastructure, including the stormwater overflows and things like that. There's nothing at all in the BIL for this affordable housing or high-speed rail or the drought problem. We're glad that the administration passed it. It shows that bipartisanism and the Congress can still work, but it's too small. If we're really serious about fixing all of our nation's infrastructure, we're going to need the National Infrastructure Bank to top up and provide financing for the other 90% of the money that's still missing. So the operations of the NIB are really expected to not only fix all of our infrastructure, but actually supercharge the American economy. It'll create 25 million new great paying jobs. The legislation requires that workers be paid Davis-Bacon wages. That's family sustaining wages, so that now they'll be able to afford to support their families. Buy America only for the construction inputs mean that we'll be promoting American manufacturing and creating even more jobs. We estimate we can get GDP growth up to 5% per year. That's where it was the last time we had a bank like this. Economic models show the same. So keep in mind now, we're able to finance everything we need and jumpstart the American economy, all without any recourse to the federal budget. No new federal taxes, deficit spending, anything like that. This has been the hang up for financing infrastructure in the past. So this should make the legislation appealable to both Republicans and Democrats alike. No new inflation either. This kind of investment makes the economy more efficient, trucks move faster, that kind of thing. And every single sector of the economy is expected to thrive on account of NIB operations. Small and medium businesses will grow. There'll be spin-off business opportunities beyond the immediate construction. Workers will benefit. This will help poverty and income inequality will be reduced. Rural and urban improvements. I know there's a lot of areas in Pennsylvania, for example, where the money, little as it is, doesn't even reach rural areas, including for broadband, for roads, for bridges. This will reach every corner of America, and federal, state, and local finances will also improve. So I just wanted to discuss, since you are very interested in climate change and remediation for climate change, I did want to show you how this bill overlaps with the Green New Deal and the legislation that didn't manage to get passed by Congress, the BBB, the bipartisan, the Build Back Better, bill that did not get passed, and the little bit of electric vehicles and things like that that are in the infrastructure bill. So I wanted to compare, overall objectives between the Green New Deal and the NIB. As I see it, the objective of the Green New Deal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to net zero emissions by 2050, a very large goal. And one of the main ways that this was planning to be done was to convert all transportation and vehicles to electricity, and then build out the electric grid with renewables. So the other objective broadly was to fix societal problems, develop, have an economic growth that's more equal, and getting racial justice out of all this, and then improving clean air, clean water, healthy food, those kinds of things. They're all basic rights. The Green New Deal was not originally costed out. We saw one estimation from the Department of Energy that if you moved all electric vehicles onto electricity, if you moved all vehicles onto electricity and built out the power grid from there, one item alone would be $3 trillion over 15 years. So that was not necessarily costed out. By comparison, the National Infrastructure Bank finances all of the Green New Deal objectives: clean water, clean air, building high-speed rail, modernizing the electric grid, creating millions of great paying jobs. The only exception was 100% generation from renewables. And that's because our emphasis of the bank has been on rebuilding the transmission grid and letting the private sector market, which is already moving over to renewables, build itself out, do its own investments, and then the transmission grid would be in place in order to move that electricity. So the NIB is fully costed out. That's all in the $5 trillion. It's a New Deal type of a bank. No need for budget appropriations, so it overlaps with everything. One of the strategic plans is about how we go about reducing CO2 emissions. As you see from this chart here, currently the largest emitter of CO2, and that's not all of greenhouse gas emissions, but it's CO2. The largest transmitter is the transportation sector. So our emphasis in the NIB is to go about this a little bit methodically by seeing if we can move more transportation off of roads and off of air and into rail. And for that purpose, we are really trying to build out the high-speed rail system in the United States and the commuter rail and passenger rail segments of the economy, and even some express freight, if we could get that onto rail as well. We want to bolster the electric grid, as I'll show you in just a minute. We want to bundle construction projects together so that we are saving on construction costs. And we want to see if we could do something in the agricultural area, not shown on this graph here, but agriculture emits a lot of methane. And we want to see if we can do agricultural CO2 sequestration to hit that mark as well. I live in Virginia. This is my favorite road in Virginia, I-95, which stretches from Boston all the way down to Miami. I remember
I don't know how much time they have.
Okay, yeah, so we have a big traffic congestion problem. So putting more rail in the mix will solve the traffic congestion problem. We want to add high-speed rail. These are where the lines could go. You can see the Boston all the way down to Miami line would be covered. This is the best way to save on CO2 emissions and also economical as well. We want to harden our electric power grid, which is vulnerable to to extreme weather events, storms, wildfires, cyber attacks, and it's not ready for electric vehicles. This is an article on New York State, how their transmission lines are not up to full capacity to move renewable energy. And we want to make sure that we harden our electric power grid. So the NIB provides the solutions that we need. It's a full financing of all of our infrastructure costs. Doesn't require reliance on the federal budget. The Build Back Better bill has now been sidelined, and congresspersons, including from Pennsylvania, tell us that's it. That's all she wrote. They're not going to do any more infrastructure bills. So if we don't do this National Infrastructure Bank, we're going to this is all we're going to get. And not anywhere near enough. It's not going to solve your problems with lead service lines, all those rickety bridges or anything. These are the endorsements that Stu mentioned. We now have state legislatures that are endorsed in both chambers in Alaska, Delaware, Maine, New Jersey, Nevada, Rhode Island, also Washington Senate and Illinois House, and many more other legislatures have introduced resolutions. We're also endorsed by the U.S. High-Speed Rail Association, the National Association of Counties, lots of city organizations, the Public Banking Institute, and the grassroots is really growing and growing to support this bank. So here's how you can help. You can read more about the NIB at nibcoalition.com. If you have any questions or you want to have any more presentations like this, we can do it. You can sign open letters to your members of Congress to see if we can get on some senators and some Republicans onto this bill. And if you like, you can even make a donation, to our website, which we use mostly for advertisements for the NIB. Thanks very much.
All right. Okay, I think the best thing is just throw it back to you, and however long you want us to hang around, we'll do it. And then I'll actually come up with 3 very specific recommendations, but why don't we throw it open?
So any questions? Well, if nobody's going to jump in, I'm going to jump in. Why doesn't everybody embrace this? Like, this seems to be well, this seems like a no-brainer, but it's not moving very fast.
Well, I tell you, it's funny. There's a lot of problems. Number one is that Congress as a whole, and they're good people. I mean, we're meeting them, literally, we have meetings around the clock at congressional offices and with members. On the one level, there was this wild dust storm that hit in 1994. It was probably the worst environmental disaster in the last 30 plus years. This immense cloud of dust settled, interestingly enough, over the US Capitol. And it was called the Newt Gingrich campaign. And it blinded both parties to the history of the country, how we built the country, and became part of the nominalist interpretation of the Constitution, which we see in all of the recent, completely disturbing decisions or recommendations of the Supreme Court. And no, I'm just kidding. These morons bought the Newt Gingrich line, hook, line, and sinker, that you can only build infrastructure through the budget, that you have to actually run the US government the way a household runs its family budget. The checkbook must balance at the end of every month. That is true for the family checkbook, although not really, because people take out a mortgage and pay for their house over time. Most people, not everybody, buy their cars on credit and pay for it over time. They buy other items the fact of the matter is the budget we don't run the home budgets, by balancing the checkbook every month. These guys, brainwashed the Congress over the last number of years. So they all believe this. Look, the Democrats believe it. They believe it's got to come through the budget, and we're Democrats and we're recruiting Democratic members of Congress. But the leadership in both houses, Nancy Pelosi, who I know, very nice person, like her, she's a moron on economics. The House leadership is moronic. Peter DeFazio, Pallone, these are well-intentioned people. They bought it. They drank the Kool-Aid. And the Senate is exactly the same thing. And the Republicans, 50% of them are unspeakable. I mean, okay, we'll call them Republicans for lack of a more, appropriate term. So that's the first thing that happened. The second is this idea of siloing power in the Congress, that my committee has to be the responsible committee to dole out whatever items are going to be put into, people's various districts. I want the power and I want the credit for it. And that's a deep, abiding disease. The Transportation and Infrastructure Committee under DeFazio outlawed any idea of an infrastructure bank, outlawed it. This is our committee. We've waited years for this power, and we're going to do it our way. And the same, is true in the Senate, is equally egregious, in this matter. The third thing is the Wall Street banks mediated by the bond market. We want to be able to do infrastructure spending by municipal bonds. That's how we do it. We make a lot of money underwriting municipal bonds. Of course, they don't do that many municipal bonds. And the fact of the matter is that we've been unable to actually build the infrastructure of the country in that mechanism. So the Wall Street guys have a second problem, which is that they're going broke. I don't know if people read the newspapers or watch, the economic news, or you might be familiar with something going on Wall Street right now in the financial markets. They built up a gigantic bubble. Like the bubble in 2008, this bubble is coming unglued. Problem is when you get into what's called reverse leverage, where all the money was borrowed to buy all the stocks, and the value of the market increased 46% in 2 years. That is a bubble. Well, when it starts to fall upon itself, it starts to go into what they call reverse leverage, people cashing out, running for the hills, blah, blah, blah. Why? What does that mean? It means that they don't want to spend, the idea of a $5 trillion bank, all they're interested is bailing themselves out and using the Congress and using this fool, Jay Powell, as the vehicle to bail themselves out. And I'm being nice about these people because we actually know them. Now, can we win them over? Of course we can. It takes a crisis. FDR understood this. In a crisis, people can change dramatically. So the bottom line is was the great fog that came over. And the beauty of the current economic crisis, the fog's beginning to lift. And as Mike Doyle signed the bill on Friday, the congressman from Pittsburgh, and he said to us, look, I'm signing this because Congress is not going to do anything else. They may not do anything else for the next 10 to 20 years on infrastructure or industry. I am scared. The beauty of your infrastructure bank is that it's permanent. It will pick up the slack and it will solve the mess, the mess in the country. So I know that's a long answer. Does that help you at all, Phyllis, or is that? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
So
We'll try.
anybody else have any questions?
I have one.
Sure, go ahead.
So $5 trillion of and what funds that is private ownership of what T-bills and US bonds.
Right.
What is the total amount of outstanding US bonds that's owned privately and T-bills?
20 trillion.
Good question. Go ahead, Alfaka.
Yeah, it's about 20 trillion.
And will there be any, if people, you'll get voluntary exchanges of the federal money for that. Is there any risk involved with the people who will exchange?
So we have already talked to folks who might be willing to do this investment in the NIB. They would typically be long-term holders of treasuries, like a labor union pension fund or a state employment pension fund. Anybody that needs to have AAA rated paper in their fund and is also looking for a higher return because dividends on those treasuries have been so low lately that it's not high enough to fund the pension out into the long run. They would be very interested because this is the same as fully backed treasuries because it has a government guarantee. The bank has a government guarantee, so it's the same as a triple rated instrument for them, and they would be very interested in holding it.
So in a sense, the legislation, it also includes a government guarantee.
Yes.
If you're interested, Alfaka did meet with another one of our representatives and with Congressman Danny Davis's office in a apparently hilarious meeting with the comptroller of the currency's office, because they oversee banks. This would be a federal bank, and they gave it the green light, and they had apparently half the attorneys they had, how many attorneys were there? 15 attorneys going through this thing. And they said, well, works for us. And it's been vetted by the Legislative Council and the Congress several times, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's just like, this is, if, I actually, believe it or not, read Alexander Hamilton's First Bank of the United States. This crazy model was concocted originally in Pennsylvania. This is a big Philadelphia gizmo. The first iteration was Robert Morris's Bank of, I think it was called Bank of North America, which helped fund the American Revolution. It was in, I think, Bucks County. You guys may know, there's a statue and all that. And he's the guy that said, yeah, let's get this young kid, Alexander Hamilton, off Broadway and let him do something useful and get him in the Treasury Department. And I mean, he wasn't the best actor in the world, although he had to act in front of the Congress on a regular basis, and takes one to know one. But this is his concoction. And his basic idea was, let's just exchange newly minted Treasury debt for stock in the bank, and we'll pay an additional amount with all the federal guarantees. And that's how the bank was first put together, and hilariously was overcapitalized in one day. And if you guys are in Philly, so if you go to, you probably have seen it, but if you go to Independence Hall, the First Bank of the United States is still there next door, right? Isabel's seen it. And if you go up the street, the second bank is there, and that was John Quincy Adams Bank. But this is really Pennsylvania. That's the name of the it's skipping my mind. The president of the second bank was a Philadelphia guy who was in the legislature. It'll come to me. Really smart. This was his formulation also. The banks, it worked. I mean, they did everything that we didn't have a Federal Reserve. We didn't have a central bank. So the first banks were repositories, for money coming in, taxes, but they also financed, the canals, the roads. There was no infrastructure in the country. So they built the whole thing. And, people took a risk, it worked. And the banks ended up in the black. So it was the model. We lifted Hamilton. Oh yeah, so I read the bill. So we lifted Hamilton's verbiage verbatim, and just slapped a different name on it, and we threw a lot of Franklin Roosevelt in the mix, who, by the way, did a paper at Harvard on Alexander Hamilton when he was at Harvard. So, and it turns out his great grandfather was Hamilton's business partner in the Bank of Manhattan, which was also a predecessor of this bank. So, it's just this darn Newt Gingrich disease came in, and people lost track of history. But does that answer your question, Arthur? I mean, we're beating around the bush here.
Sort of.
Sort of, yeah. No, it would be federal, full faith and credit of the government would back this. This is a federally created institution. It's a government-owned bank. So it's imagine the Federal Reserve, but for infrastructure.
Mm.
So it's the same kind of institution. But whereas the Fed's mission, I don't know, what they say they do and what they do are two different things, but they have a mission in terms of, controlling the money supply and inflation, and also quote unquote full employment. And so that's why they never get involved in this kind of thing. So you could do, and this was adjudicated, you could do a bank dedicated to infrastructure only. So that's the concept, with a lot of historic precedent, by the way.
So Kelly asked, do you think the public utility commissions would get on board with this?
I think they'd be really interested, I'll just take a stab at this, and then I'll turn it over to Alfecca. But in the 30s, when FDR did rural electrification, they really, they created all these public entities, co-ops, as the vehicles for the bringing electric power into every nook and cranny. The poor, they started with the absolute poorest areas of the country and lifted the standard of living. And it was done in opposition to the big private utilities who didn't want to go in because they couldn't make any money. So there was this, and FDR was 100% pro, public entities, and, helped foster them. And, he knew the Walls. I mean, he worked on Wall Street. He knew these guys, and, he knew the whole gang. So I think they would be extremely open, and, we We also see the same kind of things being created to bring broadband in. Use the same rural electrification model. And the REA, the Rural Electrification Administration, which was created by FDR, was financed by the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, which was the de facto national bank of its day. In fact, you take a stab at it. You know,
Yeah, I would just, I've testified before public utility commissions for rate increases. I don't know, most of you know it, but anything that's a monopoly, like a water utility or a transmission line, they have to go before a public utility commission to ask for a rate increase. And that also goes for when they do capital investments, that they want to pass on the cost of the capital investment to the ratepayers. And one of the things is to open a dialogue with some of these utility commissions, especially in the electricity transmission area, where they have certain models for what they think is, for example, going to be climate change over the next 10 and 20 years. And their models are not predicting how much devastation is happening to utilities on account of the weather changes, wildfires, storms, things like that. So we need much more investment in the utilities to make sure that they're resilient to all these climate changes. And that needs to open a dialogue with the public utility commissions. And we'll be offering low rate and well-designed projects where we can have economies of scale to all kinds of water projects across the country and transmission lines across the country in order to bring costs down as well. So we'll be able to help them manage the actual engineering of these projects to make sure that they stay, cost effective. But there's lots and lots of, synergy that can happen here. And we need to do this. The National Infrastructure Bank has a dedicated $80 billion, for example, to build a renewable energy grid overlay to move renewable energy, say, from a cornfield in Oklahoma over to an end user in Atlanta, Georgia, along the time zones and, mapping the times of the day when the energy is produced and having all of the smart technologies in place to balance the load. They call the energy transmission system of the United States the biggest machine in the world. And it needs a lot of high technology to keep it running smoothly. And we've got 55,000 substations, for example, with transformers in them. If there was a cyber attack on only 9 of them, we could take down the entire, terrorists could take down the entire grid of the United States. These are things that we can't leave, to chance. We need to work on them. So we have dangers from everywhere, and there's lots of work to be done. And I see great synergy with the utility commissions. Yeah.
So Kelly asks again, that she's asking about the Advanced Energy Economic Institute, and she says they're pushing for this model. Are you people talking to the Advanced Energy Economic Institute?
No, but we'll give them a buzz. I mean, right now we're overwhelmed with ideas which we really like. We'll do it. We'll call tomorrow. Do you know where if somebody's got a location or a phone number or a contact information, or yeah, sure, we'll put a call in. Good idea. And other ideas. I mean, we really have not cornered the market on how we're moving this.
We have a
forward.
long list of universities and think tanks that we keep on our mailing list and call them up if we have questions. For example, Georgetown University on how many jobs will be created by infrastructure investments, those kind of things. But we were talking to some engineers who were studying the electric vehicle plan and whether it would actually meet the objective of zero emissions by 2050. So they've got modeling for all those kinds of things, and we're in touch with all those think tanks.
Well, we're
So
happy to call them. Go ahead.
I have an out-of-the-box idea. If the feds can't do this, could we do this as a state level, a municipal level, county level, or it wouldn't work because you need the vast quantities and the vast amount of investors?
We're in touch with the public banking groups, and we know that a bill just passed the Philadelphia City Council to set up some kind of public bank institution, or at least enabling legislation. And the National Public Bank Institute folks have endorsed our bill. And we've actually been in touch with the public bank folks in Philadelphia, have been on numbers of our Zoom calls. And at the end, when we go into quote unquote our asks, we are having a big Zoom call on this tomorrow night, and the national head of the Public Bank Institute, Ellen Brown, is going to be a speaker. That said, we support the idea of state bank or a city bank or whatever public bank, but they are very open about it. They're just going to be too small. They will do various projects in the states and cities. There is an infrastructure bank as part of the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation. It's very useful. It handles some projects that are only transportation in the state. And that's good because the transportation system of the state is in a state of collapse. It's not the bridge that collapsed in Pittsburgh. It's the other 3,300 that have the same rating in the state of Pennsylvania that have to be repaired. That one was not even on anybody's radar screen, which is how bad the thing is. And the amount of money the federal government's gonna, kick in this new infrastructure bill is gonna be 1/10 of what's needed. So you have the state infrastructure bank, and it's too small, but it helps. And if there's a Philadelphia public bank, it will help. The beauty of the National Infrastructure Bank is that it is scaled to be big enough to do everything. And it will be, we had a really good meeting with the leadership of the Infrastructure Bank of New Jersey, which is also quite big. And they said they're too small. And they said the biggest problem they have beyond being too small is they're not allowed to cross state lines. And they love the idea of the National Infrastructure Bank because, Jersey, I mean, it gets a bad rap, but it's actually a good place. And, it borders Pennsylvania, it borders Delaware, and it borders this tiny state called New York. And there are all these you guys know, you drive up and down I-95. Their biggest complaint was the Delaware Memorial Bridge, which frankly, everybody uses and nobody likes. And I drove it many, many times when I lived, in Philly and in the East Coast, and which I still do. And they said, look, people know when they have to discuss the bridge and repairs or on ramps, off ramps, and just basic shoulders. Nobody comes to the meetings because nobody knows who has jurisdiction, because it's Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New Jersey. And so they loved the idea of the National Infrastructure Bank because we would just, come in, run the meeting, not me, but, maybe Alfeca, and, and I'm just kidding. There would be regs. Everybody would abide. There would be no problem. They want that. So that's the problem. It's size. It's not intention. And the beauty of the National Infrastructure Bank is that it would dramatically increase tax revenue coming in to every entity, states, cities, and the federal government. Why would that help public banks? Because frankly, public banks are the beneficiaries of investment coming in from cities or, states. And so as that money rose, it could be funneled into a state bank. The state bank could partner with, or the Philadelphia bank could partner with the National Infrastructure Bank. The infrastructure bank doesn't have to build everything. We want to collaborate with all of the commercial banks. We are not going to collaborate with the securities arm of JP Morgan Chase because that's going into a death spiral. But we want to collaborate with everybody doing commercial banking. So that's the deal. It's just too small. It's not ill-intended at all. Does that help? I mean, a little bit.
Since we're coming toward the end of our session, how about if you move us
How about
toward
some asks?
actions?
Okay, ask. 3 items. Number 1, anybody who wants, I send out every week, and Alfeca sends out every month. We do a free newsletter on this. Mine's short. If anybody would like it, just if you don't mind and you want to put your email in the chat, we'll put you on the list. In mine, the first 2 or 3 articles are on the financial crisis, and the last 3 or 4 are on the progress of the infrastructure bank campaign. That's the first ask. The second is that tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, we're doing an event on this. And we are, and Ellen Brown, the head of the Public Banking Institute, and Alfec are going to be leading it. There will be 3 or 4 state legislators speaking, including from Pennsylvania, and other folks. And we're going to really go into the progress we're making in the campaign, but also we're going to go through the current financial crisis and the fact that you can't run an economy on financial bubbles. There has to be a real underpinning of an economy, or you're in deep trouble. The third thing is that we really want more congressional co-sponsors. And I would imagine we have Dwight Evans. I imagine people on this call are at least familiar with or know who your Congress member is in Southeast Pennsylvania. We really want to go after, would we be willing to talk to the chair of finance for the city of Pittsburgh? Yes. Our resolution passed the Pittsburgh City Council. The meeting that where we just got Mike Doyle to be the sponsor was set up by a Pittsburgh City Councilwoman. So yeah, we'll do it. Congress, we need to get to Mary Gay Scanlon, Madeline Dean, Mike Fitzpatrick, not technically Philadelphia. He's the most important. We've had very good meetings with Mary Gay Scanlon. I really like her. We have to bring her on board. We like Chrissy Houlihan. We like Madeline. We've known her since she was in the legislature. Who else is there? Those are. Oh, and then Brendan, we had a very good meeting with. He didn't put his name on, but we have to circle back to him. I would say Congress, what we need is, if the organization, if you are so constituted, would like to draft a statement or a resolution or a whatever announcement endorsing or urging Congress to support this, that would be really good. And if you would like to collaborate on setting up a meeting with any of these Congress members or their staff, and we have state legislators who are actively doing this right now in the area, we'd love to work with you. So the 3 asks are your email if you want. Our event tomorrow night, you go to, maybe Alfecca, we can put this in the chat, nibcoalition.com. That's our website, and you can register for the event. And we'll also send you the registration. It's free, but you like this event, although I hate to say it, Phyllis, our registration is simpler. That's really a no-brainer, but you have to register, but everybody's invited. And anybody who would like to help with Congress, those are the 3 asks. And Phyllis has our contact information. Don't hesitate to email or call. People call me and call Alfecca all day and night. We answer the phone. We will really help out on this. And those are the 3 asks. And thank you for inviting us. And look, on the power generation, the bank is not going to, we're just not going to do power generation. It's too big. And it's being done in its own, you guys are Jewish, in its own sakrochana way. It's being done. Not well, but it is being done. It would just be too big of a dollar amount. So we're going to do literally everything else. And the beauty of our transportation plank, moving to rail on all fronts, is the best way to get rid of the CO2 emissions. It's the largest emitter, but
sometimes it helps if people have a letter that we could sign. So if you were to write a template letter,
yeah,
and the rest of us could personalize it or make it, tell our own story in it. That would be very helpful. When you say to people, could you formulate something from scratch? They clam up. They think they don't have the skills to do it. So one suggestion that you people might have is to give us some help, and then we would be happy to help you out, but give us some structure, give us, some template.
How about if I send you 2 things? We'll send you just a short letter that I'll write, tweak it, make it personal, and I'll send you a resolution, that say pass I don't know, we just passed one in the State College City Council It's good, and I'll send that over as a model, and it's not too long. I'll send you a letter and a resolution. That would be great. Happy to. We'll get it to you tomorrow.
And then we'll send it out to the people who are here tonight, as well as the people who are on our mailing list.
That'd be great. And then any ideas you have on follow-up, if you get responses, if you want to do a request for a meeting, I have a letter already done for Madeline Dean, Mary Gay Scanlon, Chrissy Houlihan. I can send that to you. You can, decide if you want to use it.
You could send it to me. I'm in Madeline Dean's district, and I'd be
Oh,
happy
good.
to send her a letter. She knows me.
That would be really excellent. I'm happy to do it. Okay.
One of your commenters said something about plastics in the ocean, and we did want to let you know that we're going to chop all those up and throw them into asphalt and retop all the roads with asphalt mixed with recycled plastic.
Cool. Let it happen tomorrow.
Hang on, I gotta just finish writing these things.
I emailed you with the emails of people who wanted to get on.
Oh,
your
all right. Oh, great. Okay, good.
Oh, sorry, you scared me to death. I'm on a call. Just a second.
Okay.
We're almost done.
All right.
All right, so that one, a couple more questions have just popped up.
Have we spoken to Summer Lee? She's a co-sponsor of our resolution in Pittsburgh. Have we spoken to the mayor of Pittsburgh? He's a co-sponsor when he was in the legislature. Yeah, we've met with Summer Lee many times. I think, do you guys think she's going to win? Did she get the nomination? I didn't follow the Pittsburgh result. Does anybody? I don't know. I know. I think she won, didn't she? I think she was winning. It was her against Irwin or something. Anyhow, it'll be an interesting race for Congress there, but she'll be a ball of fire if she gets in. She's a sweet person. She won. Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah. And yeah, no, we do know her.
And Abby said she's been reading the goodnewsnetwork.org for positive news. There's so much technology being invented by people all over the world.
Oh, good. All right, great. Yeah, there you go. All right. Anything else?
And Alicia says road base breaks down too. These chemicals can leach into water further. So that's probably an issue we need to think about. When we recycle plastic and we reuse it, it's still.
Another thing we're going to do is CO2 sequestering cement. Cement is the largest building material in the world. It emits about 15% of the CO2, and we're going to pay for in the project loans. We're going to pay for extra for CO2 sequestering cement.
To quote one of the Beatles songs, "Let It Be." Well, any other final comments or questions?
I just want to thank Stu and Alfecca for their wonderful presentation. It's a lot of information, and I hope that everybody here will reach out to their networks and let people know about this great idea.
Thank you.
We thank you, Margaret. Margaret's the main mover in this thing.
No, I'm not the main mover, but I just want to say, if you're able to go to the meeting tomorrow night at 8 p.m., that's how I got on board. I heard Ellen Brown speaking to Alfecca on a podcast, and I thought, what is this woman talking about? It sounds too good to be true. I went to the one of the NIB webinars, and I was then contacted by someone named Stu Rosenblatt.
I thought his name was NIB Coalition.
Yeah, and that's how I got on board. If you go, you'll really be glad that you spent the time.
Well, thank you all very much. This was an interesting program. Awful lot for us to process, but it just seems like it's good, win, win, win. So we need to get this to be actually a reality. And thank you for coming and speaking to us tonight from Virginia.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it. And we all secretly, we still love Philadelphia. So parts of it, any. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Okay. Good night.
Bye.